Beautiful people. How are you doing? Great to see you. Wonderful to be with you. Welcome back to the Bothy. After having some weeks of serious rain and storms in Scotland, I thought I'd just take it a bit easier and live stream from the Bothy rather than doing it from the forest. So we got the fire on. We've got a psychedelic painting of the stars, which will be relevant to what we talk about today. Let me check in on the chat and say hello to all of you. Hello, Strawberry Toffee, good to see you again. David, Jason, Plorto Pod, Deanna, Mr. Funk Monk, Fun Monk, Lisa. Thank you for joining me. Yeah, always such a privilege to be with you. Hi, Jaden. We've got a really exciting adventure in store for us today. I'm buzzing to share some of these ideas with you. Been thinking a lot, and yeah, inevitably, which is in my nature, to work really hard. And this is kind of supposed to be Tai Chi time and rest and reading, but it's been writing and thinking, which is always good. So excited to share more with you. So yeah, I'll check back in the chat before we start. Just some housekeeping is that I'm only here for a month, and this is our third Explore with George already. So next week will be the last one for now. They will continue, but as you'll see, an awful lot of work goes into these. Move and Meditate will continue. So I hope that you can join me for that. And there's still like an idea from Taoism and other traditions at the start of each one of those sessions. So they're Tuesdays live, 3 p.m. UK time. So I hope you can join me. And then in the description, there's finally the link to the second channel. If you're here last week, I mentioned it, but forgot to put it in the description. So that channel is hopefully, sharing a bit about, I want to be sharing these ideas with the world. And so I have to kind of play the game of the algorithm gods. And so I kind of want to connect with you more, but also don't want to be releasing so many videos that the algorithm starts getting scared and not showing my content to other people. I want kind of the main channel to be these really high quality films and my best work. So the second channel, hopefully over time, I can update you with other little tidbits, and it's more the kind of direct connection with you. So yeah, there's some updates, and I'll jump back in the chat just to say hello again, and then let's get into it. Hello, Daniel. Hello, Cassie. Hello, Taoist Gardener, Wildlife, Sammy the Hamster, Rose, Kelsey. Wonderful. Am I going to repost last week? I've been so busy with this one that I haven't managed to post the breathing, 3 principles of powerful breathing, which I will do tonight or tomorrow. Well, tomorrow. It's been raining. There's been a storm pass through. So yeah, you'll see in the video that there's some adventures that I had trying to film that and finish it. But yeah, that'll be out tomorrow. All right, let's get into it. So all of this upcoming is live, first time doing it. I've made some videos, and I think I'm actually going to make today's content into a kind of mini doc, 30-minute, 40-minute adventure. And so yeah, excited to share these ideas with you. And let me just do one thing, which is to increase the quality. One moment. All right, let's see how it goes. Buckle up and let's go for it. Oh, okay, let's try again. Okay, we're buckling up again. Here we go. Well, I'm supposed to be talking over this. Let's try this again. All right. There is an ancient Chinese text that's passed down the generations, lasting 2,500 years, because it was thought to contain timeless wisdom. Opening the 47th chapter, you read, "Without leaving the house, know the whole universe. Without looking out the window, see the way of nature." The author is Lao Tzu, the founding thinker of Taoism. And And the Taoists believe that the principles that govern you as a human being reflect the principles that govern the universe as a whole. So to understand yourself is to understand the universe itself. So could it really be that understanding ourselves means that we understand the whole universe? Or are these just the delusions of a philosopher who spent too long inside and needs to get out? Well, today I invite you to join me for a journey of exploration to find out. And what we'll uncover is a radically different way of understanding ourselves and the universe, which can help with some of our big crises, both as individual and our sense of meaning and relationship to the world, and also our big societal issues. So, who are you? If we're going to explore whether knowing yourself means you know the universe, we've got to be able to answer that question. But as it turns out, that's really difficult because you are incredibly complex. You are made up of 37 trillion cells, and the life in each and every one of those cells is awe-inspiring. So if you imagine the room that you're in right now is a cell, all around you are whirring, buzzing little entities that all have their own little jobs and they have specific roles and skills. So one small entity within a cell has worked out how to digest and process waste toxins. The mitochondria that we just saw are the powerhouse of the cell. They've worked out how to convert molecules of glucose and oxygen and turn them into energy, powering every single cell in your body. And so each one of these cells is an entity in itself, a microcosm, a small world. It has a border. The cell knows what molecules it wants outside of its borders. It can repair itself. And somehow 37 trillion of these cells cooperate to create you. You are relationship. You are a miracle of cooperation. But how is it that all of these cells cooperate? Sometimes we can imagine that the brain is the boss, as if there's a control center up here with screens and maybe somebody in an army uniform barking orders. This man needs to pee, move those legs. Which is fun to imagine, but that's not actually how we work. We are self-organizing. There isn't a boss. There is no superior part. Even something like the stomach has 100 billion neurons in it, and it can digest your food and do all that complexity without any intervention from the brain. And the ancients understood this without science. The Indians have a great story about this. So one day the hands and the feet and the mouth were chatting. The hands complained, all I do is carry things all day. The feet complained, all I do is walk all day. The mouth complained, all I do is chew all day. And they all looked to the stomach, who was just sitting there doing nothing. He just sits there doing nothing all day while we're doing the work. That is injustice and oppression. So you know what? Let's go on strike against the stomach. So they all go on strike. They're all feeling very happy about themselves. But of course, as the hours and days continue, they get weaker and weaker and weaker until they pass away. They forgot that there is no superior part of the body. The stomach implies the hands, mouth and feet. The hands, mouth and feet imply the stomach. They are interdependent. They need each other. And so you are the accumulation of all these incredible relationships. You're not a machine. A machine needs a boss. It has blueprints. It has someone who designs everything and then assembles the machines by putting the parts together and then, maintaining it. Whereas somehow you are a self-organizing organism. Your trillions of cells come together to create you. So we've got some idea of who you are. You are a relationship. And however, you're more than just the stuff that is in your body, because the stuff in your body is constantly changing. So let's have a look. I'll come back to that. So yeah, okay, I've got in the wrong order. I'll come back to that. So here we go. Here's George from when I was 3. And so that's recognizably me, right? Close enough. However, every single cell in my body has changed in that time. There isn't a single molecule that is the same as was in that young boy, and yet it's still recognizably me. And so all the stuff within us is constantly changing, and yet we persist. And so we've got to be more than just the stuff within us. And there's many other things in nature that are like this. So if I'm not going to take that out, actually, I'm going to burn myself. Let's see if we can get the focus on that. So, a flame of a candle, or the flame in that fire behind me. We say it's a thing, like it's a distinct object. It's that pointy shape on top of the candle. However, what that flame is the streaming of vaporizing wax. The matter within it is constantly transforming, and yet the pattern persists. And another example is a river. You can imagine an undulation in a river, and yeah, there's a kind of a consistent pattern. Or a whirlpool. So imagine a whirlpool. So a whirlpool in a river, there's a distinct feature, right? There's something that we can notice and name. That's a whirlpool. However, there's no thing that's separate from the whirlpool. The whirlpool is simply the flow of water in a certain pattern. So the matter changes and is constantly transforming, and yet the pattern persists. So that is you and I. We are a process, an unfolding process of relationships. We are in this constant dynamic movement. So going back to who are you? We could just stop at relationship, full stop, period. You are a relationship between all these incredible different entities that somehow the summation of all this cooperation brings something into being which is much greater than what the cells could ever do by themselves. The whole of you is greater than the sum of the parts. You and your full totality and complexity. But if we're going to get a bit technical, you are a dynamic process of self-organized relationship. So you're not a thing, you're not a static object like a billiard ball with hard edges, but no, you are a process, a constantly unfolding dynamic pattern. And you're self-organized. There's no boss, there's no blueprint, and yeah, you are a collection of relationships. And so that is the definition of an organism. The organism, self-organized. It has this idea that it's an entity in itself. So in more exciting language, you are a dazzling dance of interconnection, a colorful constellation of connection. You are a miracle of harmony. So if we are exploring today whether knowing ourselves means that we can know the universe, we've got some idea of who we are now. We are relationship. So does this have any bearing on what the universe is? So now we can begin to leave our rooms and leave our bodies and to start to look further afield. And not at George, but at this tree / lung. Say, what? Ridiculous. I mean, when I look at that, it's just, what's going on there? So there are patterns that are consistent within our bodies and outside in the natural world. Holy moly. All right, let's have another look at another one. So we have a human head, a shell, and a massive hurricane, all exhibiting the same patterns. Wow, wow, wow. So this begins to indicate to us that there are certain principles of the universe that govern us, but also govern nature as well, nature outside of us. And it's still a deep mystery why patterns repeat in so many different ways. We kind of know in specific instances, but nature seems to like patterns. But what science can tell us about, about the trees and the lungs having this similar relationship is that we are family with the plants and animals. We share 60% of our DNA with trees, we share 80% of our DNA with cows, we share 99% of our DNA with bonobos. So we come out of the intelligence of this universe. And so our cells are very similar. If we look, an animal cell and a plant cell, there are differences, but they both have nucleuses and they both have the mitochondria that we saw earlier, the powerhouse of the cell. And so deep in evolutionary history, billions of years ago, the first mitochondria worked out how to convert glucose and oxygen into something called ATP, energy. And that mitochondria then somehow got captured within a greater cell, and so there's this symbiotic relationship between the mitochondria, a mini entity within a bigger entity. And this is the fundamental building block of all of life. It's like the intelligence of life worked out how to get energy from molecules of sugar and oxygen and turning it into energy that this cell can use. And so ever since then, life, the intelligence of life, has built upon this building block to create the abundance of and beauty of all the beings that we see on the planet today. Now, so we're family with the trees, which is why if we go back to this photo, that actually some of the patterns that govern us repeat. But our relationship with the trees isn't like your relationship with your 20th removed cousin who you've never met and actually lives in Spain now, and you didn't know that they'd moved out of England. No, you are in daily contact with this relative. And so what is that relationship? Well, if we take a breath together, I invite you just to take an inhale and an exhale. 99% of the air that fills our lungs was made by plants. The oxygen that powers our whole body was made by plants. And so we are in an inseparable relationship with them. And so when we explored who we were, we found that the cells with a microcosm, a small world that together cooperating created you, a macrocosm, a bigger world of that is greater than the sum of the parts. But now we are finding that the relationships that make up you are not just within the border of your skin, but instead transcend it. You are deeply embedded in the harmonic web of life on this planet. We need the trees to breathe, the trees need the fungi need the plants and animals. We, on a planetary scale, are completely dependent upon the many different aspects of the planetary system. Let's see if this is going to work. For example, the magnetic field, which prevents the sun's rays frying all of us. Then, of course, all living beings physically are held up by the earth itself. The earth is the space in which and from which all life on this planet comes to be. It's completely dependent upon it, and we are embedded in that too. So, wow, we are growing now from the cell to the human to the planet, and I think you can imagine where this is going. So the planet is its own self-organizing system. There isn't blueprint or bosses. Life is this self-organizing, miraculous process. But the earth itself is embedded within an even bigger system. So if we go back to this photo of the Earth. The Earth is part of the solar system, and our sun, like any star, has its own story. Stars are born in nebulae gas, and some of that gas coalesces and becomes denser and denser, attracted by gravity, until it fuses. There's such density that the atoms touch each other, and then the lights come on and a star is born. But not all of the nebulae gas is used. And so in this nebulae cloud, there are bits of matter that coalesce and they form into planets. And so our sun has 8 such planets. And so our Earth is part of the unfolding life cycle and story of the sun. And the sun, although it seems so consistent to us, it rises every morning without fail, but in it so it seems like a static object, but it in itself is constantly transforming, the matter within it constantly transforming, and yet the pattern persists. So it too is a self-organizing system. And of course, the sun is embedded in a galactic system. Let's see if we've got a galactic system. No, we don't. We're in a galaxy. And that galaxy is embedded within the universe itself. So we've got to the universe from us. And so the universe is a dynamic, self-organizing process of relationships. And so that is the same definition that we use for ourselves. So, given that we are an organism and we are alive, we are a dynamic process of self-organized relationship, is the universe itself an organism? Is the universe alive? So, we're getting to some of the biggest questions that we can ask. Is the universe a living organism? Now, for some people, they'll be lost at this point, and I grew up as an atheist, and maybe I would have found this quite challenging. Because, in an atheism, there's this idea that it's called materialism, we seem intuitively that there's a difference between us, human beings, living beings, and something like the earth and something like the sun. It doesn't seem quite alive in the same way as us. And something crucial that we've been missing from our exploration so far is consciousness. You are watching this video, or maybe doing other activities as well, but you are having an experience right now. You are aware, you are sentient, you are conscious. And that is a baffling miracle. Science still hasn't even begun to really grasp what consciousness is. We are here and aware. Now, the kind of dominant paradigm of science at the moment is materialism. And there's this assumption in materialism that matter itself is unconscious, that the universe is nothing but the mindless and unconscious bashing of particles that work according to predictable laws that then, make everything. But then our consciousness is mysterious, and having this experience, like how does consciousness come out of unconscious material? So some materialists, they argue that our consciousness is simply an illusion. It's a trick played by our brain, and as if we are conscious, but it's not actually anything that's real. But an illusion needs a subject, right? An illusion needs someone to be duped. And so an illusion is a form of consciousness in itself, as Rupert Sheldrake talks about. So that's not very helpful. So other materialists, they acknowledge that yes, our consciousness does exist. Yes, the universe is inert and unconscious, but somewhere in our evolutionary history, enough neurons came together and wada, here we are. Now, as Ian McIlgris says, this is a miracle. Something comes out of nothing. It's like the magician rabbit out of the hat trick. Unconscious matter created consciousness, and it just kind of somehow appeared. Something that seems completely different, at least in our kind of experience of being here and now. It's not something that's physical in our understanding. And if we think about it, this miracle is done every single time a being is born on this planet. Every newborn baby, something comes out of nothing. Consciousness comes out of unconscious matter. Now, materialists agree this is a pretty challenging idea, and they call it the hard problem of consciousness. And there's actually a growing movement within science to say, actually, well, maybe consciousness is a fundamental aspect of reality. It is inseparable from what we call matter. And this idea is called panpsychism, pan being all, psychism being mind, so like mind being everywhere. And so that would mean, and we're getting into cool ideas now, that atoms in a small way have a form of experience. And then our consciousness, our highly evolved consciousness, is the kind of accumulation and then some of the kind of fundamental building blocks of existence, which is consciousness and matter. So the rationalist scientists are getting on board with panpsychism. There's a big transformation happening in science. But as Rupert Sheldrake talks about, is that we have to take this to its logical conclusion, which is that if atoms have a form of awareness and consciousness, and cells, as we've seen, they've got an awareness of having a border and moving towards molecules and repairing themselves, they are sentient and aware, and we are this highly evolved consciousness. So let's then take it even further. This would also imply that the Earth itself has a form of consciousness, that the sun itself, a self-organizing complex system, has a form of consciousness, and the galaxy and the universe. So if this were true, then we are living in a universe which is an organism, which is alive and conscious, but obviously in ways that we can't even predict or begin to comprehend with our words. It's consciousness on a level that we can't even begin to kind of understand. Now, this isn't just mere philosophizing, because this understanding can help us understand who we are, because the materialists and the kind of current dominant atheist worldview would give us this feeling that you and I, we are blips. Our consciousness just appears and then we die and then that's it. And, that's just life over. We are just spurts of intelligence in an otherwise dumb and unconscious universe. And so we are completely separate from that world and we feel isolated. But if we think about a river and we think about that whirlpool again, that the whirlpool is just the water. There isn't a thing that whirlpools. The whirlpool is the water itself. It is the matter transforms and yet the pattern persists. And so what if we replace the whirlpool with you and the water with consciousness? That you are a pattern, a coalescing of consciousness and matter in your embodied experience. And there's no separate ego or mind that's delivered with UPS next day delivery into your body. No, your consciousness comes out of the universal consciousness. As Carl Sagan likes to say, we are one way for the universe to know itself. We are a way for the universe to know itself. Our consciousness is a representation of and manifestation of the general consciousness. And so what happens when that whirlpool stops? The water within it just then dissipates. The water isn't destroyed. The consciousness isn't destroyed. And so, it's not like when I die that George is going to fly off to a cloud somewhere. But if this understanding is correct, then that means that in a deep way, I do continue and you do continue, which is really deep and beautiful. That actually we come from this undifferentiated whole and from the planet Earth, which has a form of consciousness. And then we come together, the miracle of our conception, and then our unique consciousness is brought into being, embodied and inseparable from our bodies. It comes out of life itself. It's not just delivered by some external force. And then when we die, we return to wholeness and to oneness. Chapter 16 of the Tao Te Ching talks about this. So in chapter 16, Lao Tzu says, "Witness the flourishing of all things, but contemplate their return. To return to the root is stillness. The origin of all is constant." To understand where you come from is to find tranquility. To accept where you come from is to find stillness. At one with the Tao, although your body may pass away, you will not die. So deep ideas, and yeah, beautiful. Like if that understanding makes sense to me, that actually, yeah, we are absolutely bound up with the universe. And so there's some ideas for you to contemplate. I mean, they are the biggest questions that we can ask, and there's mystery within mystery within mystery. And so we can't say any of the kind of the consciousness stuff for sure. But so let's just, for the sake of this argument and this exploration today, say that the universe is like an organism, and we leave the question of consciousness open. Because we are still, even if we understand ourselves in terms of relationship, looking at a radically different way of understanding ourselves and life. Because what is the dominant way of currently humanity understanding itself in relationship to the world? In the old school days of religion, there was the man, yes, the originating intelligence of the whole universe had a gender, or, at least metaphorically, which is challenging, and this God made the universe for human beings in particular, and we were thought to be superior to the beasts in the field, as it said in the Old Testament. And so we were different to the rest of the world and superior to it. And even as those sort of more religious views lost favour, atheism still continued it. And so Descartes, you'll know from the very famous line, "I think, therefore I am." He had this feeling that he talked about how the screams of an animal are like the creakings of a machine. The screams of an animal are like the creakings of a machine. He did not recognize the kind of the consciousness or the intelligence of animals. He just saw them as blind automatic machines. And so again, this kind of understanding of ourselves with the kind of dominant atheist worldview leaves us feeling separate and disconnected and meaningless. However, we've seen that understanding woefully undersells how the world actually works, the universe actually works, because we've gone from, we haven't even gone to the atom yet. At the atomic level, the physicists have long ago given up trying to find the fundamental particle that makes up reality. They gave up because they found that the atom in itself was relationship. All the subatomic particles, and so that the atom was a self-organized system, a process of relationship, everything existing in waves rather than being billiard balls with hard edges. And so that's true of the atom, it's true of the cell, it's true of tissues, human bodies, the planet, the sun, galaxies, and the universe. There is nothing outside of that. We don't have to posit that there is someone running the show from outside of space and time, but instead we find that a profound spirituality in science, and the spirituality coming from the miraculous magic of self-organizing, like nature is spontaneous. There are no blueprints, there are no bosses, and yet, here we are, a manifestation of the intelligence of the universe. You and I are like apples coming out of an apple tree. We are in a universe that peoples. We are in a universe that is intelligent. And so we are not separate from nature, we are nature. We are not separate from nature, we are nature. And so that can, if we understand ourselves like that, is a deep and, in my view, an accurate way of understanding who we really are and our relationship to the universe. So, you don't need, however, science to understand this. And here is just a slide. We went from the galaxy to the human head. The patterns persist. The ancients knew this. There is one of the oldest yin-yangs, and yeah, the Taoism is a study of nature, and maybe we could call it Tao rather than having the ism, because then ism sounds like it's its own school of thought and sort of culty thing, but it's a study of nature, and so the Taoists, they saw that everything was in constant flux, the cycles of birth and decay, the cycles of the seasons, day and night, and so they depicted it with the yin-yang, and they saw themselves as interdependent. They realized that yin and yang were different aspects of the same thing. If you notice that on the outside of that yin-yang is a circle, and so there is unity, differentiation, but then unity. And so they understood this not through having telescopes and satellites, but through their own experience, simply being present. And so, we took a breath earlier, and with every breath, our intimate relationship with the outside becomes clear, that actually I need the outside to be here. And so we imply one another. In the same way that you can't have a figure without something to stand on. You can't have an actor on a stage, an actor doing a play without the stage to stand on. And so you and I, if we are yang or yin, then the environment, the totality of the universe, we are absolutely bound up in it. And so whatever focus we take can be one pairing of yin and yang, and it makes up the whole. And so the Taoists understood this interdependence, this mutual co-arising is the kind of technical term for it. They come into being together. For you and I to be here, we imply everything else. And this understanding of connection goes all the way back to the origin story of the whole universe for the Taoists. So the Tao, this originating principle of everything. So chapter 42 of the Tao Te Ching is the Tao gives birth to one, which gives birth to two, which gives birth to three, which gives birth to the myriad things. So the Tao, this originating principle of everything, gave birth out of emptiness before there was matter, brought matter into being in this state of undifferentiated oneness where you can't separate anything, there's nothing outside of it. And yet within that unity there's differentiation, what the Chinese saw as yin and yang. And so those differences then interact to then make up all of the complexity that we see in the world. And so this deep understanding of the universe as an organism, there's nothing outside of it, it's self-organizing. The Taoists didn't have the need for a tyrant in the sky telling everything how to do, everyone what to do. Instead, it's spontaneous. Nature is playful and spontaneous. And the history of evolution on this planet is one of unfolding complexity through creativity. And, you can imagine all the plants and animals making little mistakes, and then our genetics are really the store of knowledge of that learning over billions of years of evolution. It can happen by itself, and so that can be a profound source of meaning and understanding, is the self-organizing magic of life and existence. So, can knowing ourselves mean we know the universe? Yes. In fact, we are embedded in a fractal set of relationships all the way from the atom to the galaxy. We are interdependent and connected, and we can find that through our own experience, through being present, and now science is wonderfully confirming so much of it. And so this understanding ourselves in terms of relationship can help us feel connected and realize that we're part of the unfolding story of life. And so what if now we turn to applying it to our big social challenges, and trying to take a systemic, holistic view of some of the big challenges that we're facing today. Because again, the West has been driven to look at the world very differently. And so after the scientific revolution, thinkers were driven to look at nature and existence as a very complicated machine. So break it down into its component parts, understand the parts, and build up from there. And so this is called reductionism. And this has been phenomenally successful. We have, the internet, we have genetic engineering. We've managed to put some humans at the top of a big rocket, fired the rocket out of the Earth, sent it to the moon. The people got off the rocket, planted a flag on the moon, got back on, came back home. We've done amazing things, and reductionism has powerfully helped us understand how the world works. However, Captain Obvious here, we are rapidly destroying our ability to share this planet peacefully. We are overusing its resources and releasing dangerous amount of fossil fuels into the atmosphere. And we have this kind of story in the West that technology will fix everything. And so with climate change, for example, we have this idea of geoengineering, where to solve climate change, we should spray sulfates in the atmosphere, which then reflect light back into space so that the planet doesn't warm up as quickly. And maybe that will buy us time, but it's this mechanistic approach to a systemic problem. The planet's warming up, cool it down. It's like cause and effect. And it's the only problem with this is that it is technology itself that has led to the climate crisis in the first place. So technology has unleashed this explosion of human power. And so Albert Einstein has a great quote, which is, you can't fix a problem with the same sort of thinking that caused the problem in the first place. And so we need to, and so basically the West has a big blind spot, is that we look at the parts and we forget to look at the relationships. And this isn't a dichotomy between East and West, and East being better because generally they look to relationships more, and West being worse. The yin-yang shows that actually, although these kind of two aspects may look in opposition, they are complementary and they are part of a greater whole. So actually, if we integrate the powerful power of technology and looking at nature in terms of parts, but integrating it with looking at relationships, then that is wisdom, right? Wisdom is gaining perspective, integrating different perspectives into a more accurate worldview. Thankfully and wonderfully, there is a movement happening in Western science, and it's called systems theory. And it's based on the assumption that we already know from our everyday language, that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. That our consciousness comes out of all of the complexity of the relationships. Something more emerges out of what the parts could do by themselves. And a quote from a wonderful philosopher and systems theorist that I'll recommend his book in a moment is, he says, the ways in which things connect are frequently more important than the things themselves. And so many of the ideas from today, and I will jump into the chat in a few minutes and to see what you thought about it. Many of the ideas from today came from this book, The Web of Meaning, and Jeremy Lent integrates Taoism and ancient wisdom with cutting-edge science and evolutionary biology to give what I hope has been an accurate representation of how the world really works. I've also linked reading and lectures for you to watch in the description to help you on your journey of self-discovery, because your journey of self-discovery is so important. As Jeremy Lent says, your search for meaning cannot be separated from what's happening in the world, because your worldview determines what you care about and what you do and your actions then ripple out into the interconnected human systems and natural systems, and ultimately culminating in the economic and political systems that run our societies. You can imagine how different a society would be compared to one society that imagines that they are separate from nature and that nature is simply a resource to exploit and extract, versus a population that understood themselves to be part of nature and that the plants and animals are family. Like, how differently would our systems be? And so your journey of self-exploration is important, you talking to friends and colleagues and taking action so that actually this worldview of relationships is actually reflected in the systems that govern our world. And we also need people at the top in the positions of power to then change the system. So if any of you want to run for office, it's no overstatement to say the future of life on this planet would thank you. But whether your actions are big or small, you matter because we are interconnected. And so this can fill our lives with meaning and motivation because we can be part of the movement that respects and protects the abundant diversity of all the other species on this planet and take action to be part of the journey to help this continuation and unfolding of the miracle of life on this planet. So thank you for watching. Lots of interesting thoughts. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and yeah, let's do it. And yeah, if you want to share with, I've got a survey link in the description, and so if you want to give me some more thoughts, I would gladly, accept and graciously and gratefully accept your thoughts. Wonderful. So I will, make sure to read all the comments previously. Glad you enjoyed, Sherry. And yeah, if anyone has any questions, please go ahead. No amount of thinking can solve overthinking. Nice. Yeah, and that is another yin yang pairing, right? Is rationality and then emotion, and actually knowing the Tao and the way of nature cannot be just an intellectual exercise. It has to be embodied and felt, or else it's just one-dimensional. Because again, we think in thoughts and with language, but for most of the history of evolution on this planet is that the intelligence was intuitive without language, and so that is an intelligence that we obviously have. We can breathe and we can do all this mad complexity without thinking about it, and so that is part of nature. Lovely. Why do we die, says Hamza. Well, there needs to be fresh energy, right? It's the cycles. Like, imagine if we all lived on this planet forever. The planet's struggling enough as it is. If you think about winter, everything dies, but come spring, everything pops back open and reopens. And so, nature understands that there needs to be renewal and new energy brought into the world to keep it healthy. And so we're the same. Survey link didn't work. I will try and send that again. And I'm glad you enjoyed. And yeah, Ian McIlgrist is really cool. That lecture, you should definitely watch those lectures that I've linked in the description. Let's just, where is that coming from? All right, let's see if I can find this. Let me see if that works. All right, I'm back with you. Let's see if that link worked or not. So the Leafman says, if there is non-duality and so the good and bad are one, what is the good in an economic world view which treats nature as a resource? Well, yeah, I mean, it's complicated, and I think that we can find kind of, even if these judgments are just labels on the world and actually, are judgments that we put onto it, and so not inherent in the systems themselves, but we can, intuitively feel that the current economic systems are disharmonious or not harmonious. So, for example, when we buy, if we buy a package off Amazon, we are completely disconnected from the effects that it has that reverberate through the system. Unfortunately, the iPhone that we may have has rare earth metals that slaves have mined in faraway places, let alone the kind of the damage to the plants and animals. And so, the price hides all of that pain. And so you could argue that capitalism is kind of based on separation. Otherwise, we would act very differently. And so it radically needs to change. But on the other hand, there is something quite miraculous about the ability for people to cooperate without there being an overlord, like a government bureaucrat allocating how many loaves of bread are going to be sent to this Scottish village and how many are going to be sent to your village. Inevitably that will come with inefficiencies and problems. And so there's something very democratic about capitalism and people freely being able to interact with each other, exchange goods and services using prices. And so, unfortunately, it's a reality of the world that we live in, is that we do have to treat nature as a resource in a certain sense. Like, you need to get food, and so you buy food as an exchange with money, and the ship has sailed on the old school agricultural utopia that the Taoists and Lao Tzu imagined. There's 8 billion of us now, and we need the efficiency of the economic systems to deliver food to people in the cities. And so that requires, in some ways, treating food and wood as resources. So, yeah, there's nuance to it. And so we massively need to change how capitalism is done. And yeah, we're still working that one out. Somehow making sure that there's limits on the amount of resources that are used, for example, and making sure that the damage that we do to the environment is accounted in the price. Like currently, if I always take the train back home, and the train home is maybe £70. To fly is £30, and it's only cheaper because the massive damage it does to everyone is not included in the price. The carbon dioxide is just released into the atmosphere, and it's not included in the price. So, yeah, it's complicated and nuanced. Saya says, is consciousness within the universe, or is the universe within consciousness? Which is more fundamental to explaining the nature of reality? Big questions. Ian McIlgrist talks about this, and I can't say anything intelligent about that. But he argues that consciousness may actually predate matter. So like if we take the example of the river, that if consciousness is the river, then the kind of what creates an undulation in the river is a rock rising above the riverbed. The water hits it and there's some resistance, and then a pattern is formed, that self-organizing consistent pattern. And yeah, he argues that the consciousness comes first before the resistance. So that's all I can say about that. But interesting thoughts. Floor Burdak says, one day I realized that everything we build stands still. We build houses, political systems in the hope they would stay there forever. Why do we do that? It seems we have a fear of change. I think you're so right there. And I think that the Taoists, embracing uncertainty. Zhuangzi has a great quote that I'll butcher, which is, step into the boundless and feel at home in the uncertainty. So the Taoists understood life is perpetually changing, and so you can't cling on to false certainties. And that's the damage of, and the danger of certainty, like say communism and the little red book that Stalin had. It's like this, if we just do this little red book, then we'll create utopia. And so this certainty. And so then that creates this sort of motivation to then kill people that disagree with the little red book because it's in the name of this utopia. But of course, even if you got everything done in that little red book and it was a utopia, and probably isn't because we can't capture something so complex in words, is that the world then changes. And so then you're stuck with this old way of thinking. And so that makes me think of religion. It's that, say for example, when Jesus and people alive in his time looked up at the night sky, they didn't have the telescopes that we had. And human beings were absolutely the most dominant species on the planet. And so they could maybe imagine when they looked up at the night sky that God made those stars for them, for human beings to enjoy. But now we see that actually God is much bigger and much more fascinating and wonderful than the people of 2,000 years ago could possibly imagine, because we now have telescopes and we can look deep into space and see just how vast the universe is. And so the world has changed, and we've understood more about how the world works. And so to dogmatically keep to a book that was, absolutely has wisdom within it and has profound insight, but to dogmatically say that that is the exclusive truth is to close one's awareness to actually reality and to react and to be in relationship with reality. It becomes a dead relationship where God becomes the word of the church and the authority, rather than a lived experience, realizing your connection and your oneness to the abundantly creative intelligence of the universe. So nature is always moving, as we found. There are no static things, and so that needs to be built into how we set our systems up. Torah, lovely. Yeah, there are people that think like you. We are connecting. All right, I could take another couple and then let's call it a day. No movement today. Sadhguru, I watched some of his videos, but I don't have anything to say about him. I haven't watched enough of him. Any more like consciousness ones? Gal, I can answer that with and move and meditate. But yeah, the breath. I've got the 3 principles of powerful breathing coming out tomorrow, and that's really powerful. Using your breath, being mindful with the breath, you get meditation for free. So it's quite an easy way into meditation. Okay, so Lotus, I'm scrolling up a bit now, says, how do you let go while still keeping your responsibilities as a mother, she said. And yeah, so if talking is, it's related to the point just made, is that, if we need flow and change, we need to let go of trying to control existence and to go with the flow, go with the grain of nature. But does letting go just mean that we just become kind of victims and we get pulled around by the forces of life? And a good metaphor for this is like when we relax and release tension in Qigong and Tai Chi, we are releasing tension, but we're not flopping down, we're not collapsing into a ball of goo. No, instead we're holding the minimum amount of tension needed to keep us upright. And if we think about a plant, then a plant similarly has tension. If we actually, and this is an interesting note about how our cells are different from plant cells, is that plant cells have a hard cell wall, and so that's one of the things that they have different. So you can see the bottom one is these kind of rigid interlocking shapes, whereas the top one are more kind of gooey and plastic and move around more. So a plant or any natural entity has tension within it. A plant isn't limp, and yet it holds the minimum amount of tension needed to be in its true nature. And so letting go isn't this just, I'm going to be pulled around, but it can also be action, and it can also be holding the responsibilities as a human being, and inevitably it is the yin-yang balance between the two, and realizing that we can let go, but also take action, but also not take action, see what happens, but also then step into the unknown and take the action that's needed. So Wu Wei and letting go isn't a recipe for just absolving all of your responsibilities as a human being, but instead it's trying to bring the least amount of unnecessary turbulence into how you live, and so to live naturally. And so the obvious question you may be thinking is, but how? And that is the question. Like, how do we live naturally? How do we live with less tension than is necessary? How do we not live with more tension than is necessary? And that's a question that only you can answer. And the journey of self-discovery that you're on is helping with that. You understand how you work, and you understand, for example, in meditation, that you can return back to the present and let go of thoughts that are giving you pain, and yet still be effective. And actually, in that meditation, you can realize that you don't have to act upon every thought. And so, if we're constantly fighting ourselves, that is unnecessary energy that's being wasted. And of course, the other plants and animals don't do that. And so letting go of tension, letting go of those thoughts, returning back to presence and acting from the present can powerfully help us live more naturally. And that's a journey of a lifetime. So it's not something that, we don't have to be perfect in doing that. But every little bit helps. All right, I'll leave it there. Beautiful people, thank you for joining me. I hope you enjoyed today. Let me just check if that link worked, because if you have any thoughts that come up, because I understand that these are big ideas and may hit up against different ideas that you have. I've sent it in the chat. I will send it again. then yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts. All right, stay safe and well. We've got our last session next week. Otherwise, Move and Meditates on Tuesdays. And yeah, I'm going to make this into a kind of epic film / documentary, what we discussed today. So yeah, let's do it. All right, lots of love. I'll see you when I see you next. Bye.